Welcome back to the show. Many Republicans are embracing Dr. King's legacy today, calling him courageous and praising his leadership. But let's face it, for many Republicans, their relationship with Dr. King is at best awkward. This one pretty much sums up what I'm talking about. Here's Willard Romney in 2007.
You can see what I believed and what my family believed by looking at our lives. My dad marched with Martin Luther King.
His dad marched with Martin Luther King. Well, that's apparently not true. Days later, a Romney spokesman said, quote, he was speaking figuratively, not literally. Not speaking figuratively, I'm literally amazed. And then there's Ron Paul, who earlier this month called Dr. King one of his heroes, but voted against creating the holiday we're celebrating today. One of his newsletters published in his name even called this holiday, quote, our annual Hate Whitey Day. And Paul is against the Civil Rights Act of 1964, calling it federal infringement on private property. But it's not just Dr. Paul. Too often on the trail when it comes to minorities and the poor, we've heard candidates stoop to ugly rhetoric.
I don't want to make people's lives better by giving them somebody else's money. I want to give them the opportunity to go out and earn the money and provide for themselves and their families.
Really poor children in really poor neighborhoods have no habits of working and have nobody around them who works. It is tragic what we do in the poorest neighborhoods in trapping children in, first of all, in child laws, which are truly stupid. Most of these schools ought to get rid of the unionized janitors, have one master janitor, and pay local students to take care of the school.
So while you bask in the joy of King-inspired unity today, watch what they're saying the rest of the year. Joining me now is Joe Madison, host of Mornings with Madison on Sirius XM Radio, and Perry Baker Jr., politics editor for thegrio.com. Thanks, both of you, for being here.
Happy King Day to you. Yes.
Joe, I want to start with you. We were together at a breakfast this morning in Washington for Dr. King, sponsored by National Action Network, and you have been to tributes down through the years, fought to help make it a holiday. What do you make of these tributes you're hearing today from these GOP candidates?
Well, let's take one thing that you mentioned today at breakfast, and that is they're going to be in South Carolina where the Confederate flag still flies over the Capitol dome. And I know that, and you know that during Dr. King's life, that Confederate flag also flew many times attacking him. How many times did he see that Confederate flag flying in opposition every time he marched, every time he demonstrated? Many, many times. Number two, we were in Detroit just this past weekend with the AFL-CIO. Arlene Baker there had a King Labor town hall meeting, and you're talking about janitors. You know what the governor of Michigan has done? He has taken the city of Pontiac, and one of the things they've done is they've gotten rid of all the janitors in the schools, all the janitors in the school. And we had a city councilman tell us, who teaches school, that he has to vacuum his own classrooms. He has to bring toilet paper to his own classroom. And he also said under emergency management, as you've talked about on your show, and others have. I was in
Detroit yesterday on emergency management.
They fired, the first person they fired was the city attorney. They fired the city clerk. They might unincorporate the city, and they're heading to try and do the same thing to Detroit, wipe out all union contracts. And in essence, all the council can do, all the mayor can do, is convene and adjourn a meeting or listen to the people. They can't even pass a resolution if they wanted an Al Sharpton day. Let me ask you this.
As Joe outlines what we're still facing all over the country, today we saw the Republican candidates, despite their past, say a lot of nice-sounding things about Dr. King. Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry praised King at a breakfast in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Let me play this for you, because you're covering the race. I want to get your perspective. But let me start with Newton and Mr. Perry.
The very first bill I co-sponsored in 1979 as a new freshman congressman from Georgia was the holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Dr. King spoke to our conscience, and he spoke to the conscience of a nation.
And Willard tweeted that he saluted Dr. King on today. And Willard's tweet read, on MLK Day, we remember an outstanding American who brought our country closer to his historic promise of liberty and justice for all. These are kind words, and I played earlier some of the contrary policies and things they've said. But let me ask you, they debate tonight on Martin Luther King's birthday in South Carolina, where the Confederate flag, which is the symbol of the Confederate, which wanted to maintain slavery and later segregation. Do you think they will be questioned and will denounce the flag so offensive to the values of Americans? Will they be questioned and denounce that flag still flying while they're debating tonight on the state capital of the state they're running in?
I think it's a good question whether they'll be asked it or not. I don't know the answer to that yet. One of the networks is monitoring this debate, so we'll find out from the network in some ways. I know in the past Mitt Romney has condemned that flag, and Newt Gingrich has said it's a states' rights issue. So there's differences in the past on the issue. I don't know what the differences are today and if they'll be precedent today or not. I think in terms of their comments today, it's good they're saying those things. I mean, I think that whatever their comments in the past have been, there's been some good parts of this campaign in their perspective. All these guys have sort of courted Tim Scott, the black congressman from South Carolina. They courted his endorsement. They've all been, Herman Cain was doing very well early in this race. There's been some moments of progress. I hope we see that tonight as well, as opposed to rhetoric. And I hope we hear more about how they would address major problems like unemployment. And I hope we hear more details of that tonight and less kind of just generic rhetoric.
Now, let me ask you this, Joe. Joe,
yes.
The debate tonight is by Fox News. Let's just be real clear.
Right.
And the question I have is, given that they chose to do it on Dr. King's holiday and they're in South Carolina, clearly Dr. King was not just for blacks, but he clearly was for issues of inequality across the board. Wouldn't you think it would be inappropriate in this time, particularly on King's birthday, a holiday, a federal holiday, if they were not questioned and not at least among the other issues they deal with, talk about economic inequality, what they would do about it, talk about the continued institutional racism, what they would do about it, talk about the flag, and talk about the issues that we face today that King even had dealt with over 4 decades ago.
I'll make this quick. Look, South Carolina left this union over states' rights. Dr. King was in favor of federal funding for public education. These candidates are opposed to it. Dr. King was in favor of Medicaid and Medicare. These candidates, through the Ryan plan, want to cut it. Dr. King was in favor of minimum wage. You ask Newt Gingrich how often he voted for or against minimum wage. Dr. King, and that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear flowery words about I voted for his holiday. I mean, I supported this. The reality is the public policy issues that Dr. King fought for, they oppose to this day, and that's what should be asked. Are you in favor of public funding for education? Are you in favor of continuing Medicaid and Medicare at the levels that will help people? Are you in favor of minimum wage? Those are the real issues. That's what should be asked, and they know that they are opposed to it, and therefore they do not stand where Dr. King, you or I stand.
Now, Perry, you've been covering this race. Let me ask you quickly. Have you seen in South Carolina, which has a huge African-American population and some Latinos, have you seen a lot of diversity in these crowds? And do you see any evidence of outreach by these candidates and the Republican Party to other than what has traditionally now been a white electorate in the Republican Party?
Well, we know Speaker Gingrich went to an African-American church on Saturday, and he got a lot of tough questions about his food stamps remark even. So we know that he did that. I know, like I said, the candidates are trying to get Tim Scott's endorsement. That's one thing they're trying to do as well, sort of on the ground in that way. How much outreach they're doing, the crowds I've seen have not been overly diverse. That's not surprising because the Republican voting electorate in South Carolina is not overly diverse either. I mean, what you'd like to see in this campaign, and not only in South Carolina but also in Florida, is a little more of the Republicans trying to go out out beyond the sort of core base and trying to reach black voters, trying to reach Latino voters, trying to reach Democrats, just trying to like broaden out their party. That's what you hope to see in this campaign, not only this month, but not only today, but throughout the rest of the election.
Well, maybe the strategy is that they want to run from that to appeal to some voters that are anti that rather than try to really bring the country together. Joe Madison, Perry Bacon, thanks to both of you for being here tonight.